When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see, oh, I won't be afraid, no, I won't be afraid, just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, you can stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me.
Hello viewers, welcome back. It's James Kalm, half-assed reporter, and we are in Chelsea. We're gonna run up here in the Chelsea Art Building and visit an exhibition by Rick Briggs. Stay tuned. I'm going to step into Satchel Projects and take a look at an exhibition by Rick Briggs. Okay, so we snagged Rick Briggs here. We'll take him away from his fans for a moment. So why don't we start out just talking about the title of the show, I Love Painting, and Painting Loves Me, which is a reference to...
It's a reference.
Joseph Beuys, yes.
It's actually, I wasn't aware of Joseph Beuys until this show was in the works.
Really?
Yes, I grew up with 7-Up bottles also. And it says right on the side of the bottle, I like it. And it likes me. And I always thought that was so funny that an inanimate object could like me back. And so when I made this painting behind you...
Okay, let's look at the painting.
I inserted a few paint rollers through the canvas.
Yes.
And on the lower right quadrant, I scribbled the words.
I love painting. Oh, okay. So, at some point you did become aware that Joseph Beuys had done a performance piece at the, I don't know whether it's the Ronald Feldman Gallery or some gallery down in Soho. And I believe, was that the piece where he wrapped himself in felt and had the coyote in the...
I believe it was.
And I think the title of the piece was something like I Like America and America Likes Me, something like that.
I Love America, I think. And
something.
I learned that, and at the same, within an hour, I was at the Jack Whitten show. I saw a painting that was called For JMB. And I've also titled the painting For JMB, which is...
Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Yes. So 2 coincidences in 1 hour.
Well, and there's a third part to that, which is, I guess, Jean-Michel Basquiat was a big fan of Joseph Beuys and knew of his work. Well, yes. That's what I heard. But then again, we'll never know.
That's very interesting.
You know what? Let's start out looking at some of the paintings. We just sort of scan over. So this piece is actually titled
I Love Painting, and Painting Loves Me.
Okay, one of the other things I wanted to talk about with you, Rick, is that for many years you've been an essential part of what I would call the Williamsburg painting milieu.
That's correct.
Something like that. And you go back, what, 40 years in Williamsburg at this point?
44.
But who's counting, right?
1981.
And you're very close friends with Chris Martin, Kathy Bradford, Margaret Luchek, Bill Jensen.
Kathy and Chris and I would exchange visits. We were all very young, and we were all growing our painting chops. And,
Right.
And it was great to do studio visits. There was not a lot of people out in Williamsburg at the time. So when I found Kathy and Chris, it was like a godsend. I mean...
And you came here from Philadelphia at some point, and were you studying in 1981? Going to school somewhere here?
Yeah, I'd gone to school at Tyler in the 70s, and I had, I moved to New York in 1980.
Okay.
And then I moved to Williamsburg a year later.
You were on Broadway, right? What was it, 375 or
Oh my God.
something like that,
It's
right?
actually 388, but the
388.
fact that you remember Broadway,
Yeah.
you've been doing a lot of map paintings.
Well,
my friend.
I'm going to stroke your ego with this, Rick. I was painting your name on the map yesterday, thinking about our little visit we're going to have here today. Anyway, we're going to keep moving on.
Okay.
The other aspect, we're talking about some of your background with the Williamsburg art scene, but you were also a painter, a house painter for many years. And I remember we did a show, or you did a show, and I think I covered part of it called Painter Man, something like that.
That's right. Yeah, I did 2 series of Painter Man paintings, and it was the first time I made any kind of narrative work at all. Any kind of
Right, it was a
record.
figure, and there was sort of a shadow guy with the paint roller and all that stuff. What's the title of this piece? Do you know right
It's
offhand?
called In the Dark Wood.
In the Dark Wood. And let me guess, this is acrylic and oil stick. Do you have
That's
any enamel paint in there? Is that a puddle of enamel?
It's all acrylic and oil stick.
And don't tell me that's about 30 by 24 inches, something like that.
Bingo.
Okay. I'm going to win a prize for being able to figure out people's dimensions. How about this piece?
That's the oldest piece in the show.
Right.
It's also alkyd house paint and oil stick.
Is that raw canvas, or did you glue that, or is there any primer on the canvas?
It's rabbit skin glue.
Rabbit skin.
Canvas.
Okay.
Because this is the alkyd paint is like oil, so it would destroy the canvas. So I had to size it first.
And so we've got some references to your house painting thing here, because these are like the skins that you would have in the top of a can of enamel house paint.
That's right. It forms
You
inside
peel it
the
out
paint
there
can.
and-
Yeah.
Put it in there as a little kind of like a medallion. And what kind of glaze is that? Is that just a natural part of the resin that was in the paint there that's
Exactly. Yeah.
pooled
The
up
paint-
there?
The paint separates
So that's
from the pigment. The
alkyd something
medium.
or other, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you were talking about the fact that when you're doing the Painter Man series, that you actually had kind of a figure of the heroic painter. But all the recent stuff that I've seen, you've gone to pretty much totally abstract.
That's right.
And I think, well, let me get back and see if we can get this in the frame. So this would be as an example of just totally abstract, although you do a lot of your painting with rollers.
Yeah.
With rollers, and is this is also acrylic?
Yeah. It's also acrylic.
So it's
And,
water-based.
Thinned out paint. And you know, the thing I learned to love about acrylic is translucency, so that it really carries a lot of light and projects it, bounces off the canvas.
One of the things that I appreciate, and I think this goes back because you've had such a long professional working experience with paint, is that you have what I would call a very pragmatic approach to paint.
Yeah.
I was going to say the other thing is there's actually, we're included in the wonderful show that Chris Martin put together over at Anton Kern that we're probably going to drift over later this evening for the closing. But
yeah, there's a matter of factness about the
there is, and I was just going to say that a lot of the work that is in Chris's show, it's dealing with like the spiritual content of painting and the mystical this and the mystical that, and you know, there's a whole, what could I say? Well, the spiritual aspect of art, and that's an important part of it, but in a certain way, I kind of respect what you're doing in that you've kind of made a point of going back and just saying, well, you know, we've got the paint, we've got the tools, we've got, you know, the simple things that painters use, and that's become kind of the subject matter of what you're doing, so you're not getting carried away in all this metaphysical, spiritualistic,
you know, my position,
esoteric stuff.
Yeah, I mean, true creativity is spiritual by nature. I don't need to call it spiritual. I think, you know, when you're really making something, there's some kind of transformation that happens, and I don't necessarily take credit for that. It's something that happens through me.
Okay, let's look at some of the smaller pieces.
Sure.
You know what? I want to take a look at this one. And this is another example where you've got some of your, what do you call it? Your paint, the paint can skins?
Color swatches, just one color swatch. And so this one has spray paint, oil stick, color swatch, and the Alkyd house paint.
If you were to cite anybody that's been an influence, you know, well-known painters that, you know, have got an art historical background or presence, is there anybody that's, you know, you look at and say, gee, that's kind of interesting, I'd like to bite on some of that stuff?
You know, with that painting you were just looking at, I would say Howard Hodgkins.
Okay, that would be the person I was kind of fishing for.
But, you know, I've been painting so long.
Right.
It's, in a way, I'm kind of referencing my own history. I mean, I kind of work from my own history at this point. I think when you're, you know, in your 20s and your 30s, you're working through various artists that have influenced you.
Right.
And then you are off on your own, and you're making your own work. So, I mean, I hope that people could see references from art history in the work, but I don't feel like it's necessary to name myself.
Okay, we're going to look at some of the smaller pieces, and am I wrong? Are all these exactly the same size? So we're talking about
12 by 16.
12 by 16, okay. And again, we've got our paint can skins in there.
And some have color swatches, and the titles come from inside. It looks like a floral.
Right, color samples.
And this one is called Paradise. I get the title from the color swatch.
Well, I think they must have hired rooms full of poets or whatever to come up with the titles for some of these. What is that one called? Lesser Lemon. Unmellow Yellow. Okay. I've got some very poetic titles. And your wife, Sherry Mendelson, is also a well-recognized artist and part of the Williamsburg scene, and has been for many years.
That's true.
What's the title of this piece?
It's right there.
Oh, boy.
Whiplash.
I should have known. I covered a show that you had out in Brooklyn probably 10 years ago, something like
The
that.
Ortega y Gasset show?
Ortega y Gasset, yes.
Was 8 years ago, 2017.
Wow. Over on 3rd Avenue, is that right?
Correct. Third Avenue, Third.
I still go by there when I visit Whole Foods. You know what?
If I can give a plug for Sherry, she has a show coming up at Pamela Salisbury in Hudson
In Hudson.
on May 17th.
Everybody's moving to Hudson. Let's wrap up looking at this piece. We're kind of talking about your empirical, your pragmatic approach to painting.
Right.
And I guess a lot of people would look at this and consider it almost more of a sculptural piece, but it's actually, it's like a painting that's been taken the stretchers and made them into a frame that's more like a cube, but it's still basically a painting. Although you did paint the stretchers, right? That's yellow paint.
I
stained them. Okay. And
Yes, it complicates it, that relationship between painting and sculpture. And I'm interested in that idea. I mean, I also added some staples that are not strictly functional, that are
Right, that's
more
kind of a
form of drawing.
right, and it also makes a reference to a regular canvas on a regular stretcher flattened out, but yeah, I always liked staples. And that's roughly about 5 feet high, something like that, by 20, it's maybe a little more than 24, so there's a 28 by 28, something like that? Or is it 24?
It's 20 by 15.
Okay.
20 and a half by 15. Something like that. I called it that stance.
Okay.
Thinking about how Pollock was described as moving around the canvas and almost
And
like
dancing, yes.
dancing manner. And yeah, it also gets back to where we started in the sense of the subjectivity of the painting. The painting as an individual. The first one was loving us back, just like the 7-Up bottle. 7-Up was telling us, we love you, you love us, we love you, and this one's inviting us to dance.
Okay, well, we love dancing with you, Rick. So thanks for very graciously inviting us in for the conversation here at the Satchel Project. And the title of the show again is I Love Painting, and Painting Loves Me.
Thank you, Kate. I beat you to the punch.
You got the punchline in right. All right, thanks, Rick. And I'll probably see you over at Love Poems later.
Thank you.
The lesson is not new. Official verse culture is pernicious, not so much for formulating radical poetries which have developed alternate means of production and reproduction, but for the history of poetry and the centrality of poetry within contemporary culture. The Norton peddles its wares as a valuable introduction while proclaiming poetry's death. But it's alive! This collection continues the necessary work of both celebration and reflection on poetry as a living art.
Yes, viewers, we are at the Pace Gallery in Chelsea. We're going to take a little stroll through an exhibition by Jean Dubuffet titled The Hourloupe Cycle. I've pedaled past her a couple times, looked in the windows, and thought I had to come in and see this. Also, I noticed this has been very popular with the selfie crowd. titled Tour au Recitus, 1973 to 2007. Polyurethane paint and epoxy. Well, I think Jean Dubuffet is maybe one of the most important, influential, intellectually stimulating artists of the last 100 years, and I think he's, especially in the United States, is probably extremely underrated. I'll talk a little bit about this as we go through the show. Well, they've got some kind of a meeting happening here, a group of people. This is titled Composition avec Cheng Kusonish's 1965, and this is ceramic. I remember seeing one of Dubuffet's last shows at Pace on 57th Street and was very much taken with the work. And that was the first time that I'd seen a lot of his kind of late work, the flat acrylic painting stuff with the stripes. I'd seen a lot of his earth paintings, butterfly paintings, rock paintings, the material paintings in Europe. But this new kind of flat stuff was new to me. This is Solario portrait. March 1st, 1967, vinyl paint on canvas. Well, I was saying that I thought Dubuffet was one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, and it wasn't only for his own work. He was also the guy that coined the term art brut and was the first, I guess what you would say, fine artist that really took on the project of classifying, collecting, and researching the whole idea of art brut and what has since become known as outsider art, visionary art, art of the untrained, all those things. But he started it all with art brut. This is Le Livre Quievert, 1965. Vinyl paint on canvas. Well, not only did he invent art brut and got involved in a lot of the political and aesthetic debates and arguments about that, he introduced it to people like André Breton and the Surrealists, and he even came to the United States and started doing some tours and making lectures. I know he had a studio here in New York for many years, well, at least a year and a half, something like that. Okay, so this is Table on a Bottle, 1970. I was looking at this and thinking that a lot of these sculptures, actually, they look like they were just sawed out of blocks of styrofoam and then painted with this vinyl paint. It's kind of a still life. And they've got a couple of large trees of his down on Wall Street that were very famous. This is Vie de la Vente, 1964. Vinyl paint on canvas. Well, as I was saying, I was familiar with his material paintings. He's using a lot of, well, oil and alkyd mixed with mud and dirt and scraping into it and very kind of primitive figurative things. But they all had a very low-keyed palette, muddy palette, intentionally. And, well, I appreciate this period because he really decided he was going to bump up the color. And also, although there is a quality of the materials here, he really goes out of his way to exploit the whole medium of paint. And he was very good, and using the patterns, I think, is also very interesting. Fusel Canardier, he's got these with one day, January 30th, 1966, vinyl paint on canvas, 52 by 81. And it would be interesting to know if this kind of his flattening out of his paintings was a reaction to pop art, maybe the color field painters, things like that. And I also know that I think Jean-Michel Basquiat was influenced by this period of work. Scissors, number 1, 1966. Okay, so I was wondering if this was a response to pop art. In a certain way, this kind of echoes Klaus Oldenburg and some of his pieces from the store and his other kind of blown up images of products. Portrait del Horloge, April 4th, 1965. This is vinyl paint on canvas, 63 by 31. Oh, and I've got the broad frame. Also, it's nice to see some of these that are, he's using color, but he's using it in a very limited way with a black background. As I was saying, he came and he spent some time in New York, and then he went out and traveled around. I think he gave a very important lecture at the Art Institute in Chicago. And, well, there were a lot of people there that heard him, I think. Klaus Oldenburg talked about listening to his lecture, and at that point he was talking about art brut, the whole new version of abstraction. And also, this was at the height of abstract expressionism, so people like Mark Rothko, Clifford Still, William de Kooning, all those guys were, had spent about 15 years trying to throw off any kind of figuration. And I think that Dubuffet and his kind of use of primitive figurative elements influenced them. And within 6 or 8 months of his lectures talking about art brut, both de Kooning and Pollock started to reintroduce the figure. See if we can squeeze this in the frame. This is Nungstans, May 16th to June 5th, 1965. This is 5 feet 3 inches by well, this is not correct. Oh, each panel is 5'3" by 8'3", so, but I would estimate that that's at least 22, 25 feet long. Beautiful piece. I think he's also a master of the off-whites. Okay, and we've got a couple of fairly large sculptures. Oh. And I'd like to have that in my backyard. This is titled La Festillo, after maquette dated 20 May to December 1973. This is 8.5 by 6.5 by 3. Oh, this is another beauty. La Seville. Polyurethane paint on epoxy, 1973 to 2014. This is 12 foot 10 inches by 6 foot 11 inches by 2 3/8. And it's like a part of his painting just ripped itself off the canvas and started flailing around. So I like the way that they're painted on both sides. Let's look at some of the sculptural pieces. A lot of these are based on still lifes. This is titled The Laden Counter. Epoxy paint on polyurethane in 15 parts. And again, you can see the little saw patterns on the sides here. I mean, he might have been cutting this with a hot wire, I'm not sure. This is the piece that everybody likes to come in and pose on. This is called Bank Salon. And I guess this is in pieces, and also these floating elements are considered part of this piece. You really get the feeling that this was intended to be outside somewhere, and you could sort of lounge on that, and maybe this would be suspended somewhere over the top like a parasol. Jardin d'Imal, 1968. This is 2 7 3/4 by 9 feet 10 inches by 6 feet. Okay, this is interesting. I would like to see this blown up and used as a fountain. You could have little wading pools in there. I got a little figure down there. It's 1968. Offries Glonte, 1967. Vinyl paint on canvas, 51 by 63. Well, it is ironic that Dubuffet discovered, created Art Brut, and then he got involved in some arguments about what it meant to be Art Brut and be a real outsider, and some of the Art Brut artists started becoming insiders, and Dubuffet himself kind of borrowed a lot of their imagery, their approach, their attitudes, but always as a very sophisticated, educated part of that. Échange de Vues, 1963. This is oil on canvas, 86 by 118. Well, I think after Dubuffet discovered art brut, he had to come up with another name for the people that were not quite totally self-taught. So I think he called them something like fresh developments, fresh inventions, something like that. And I think then it was maybe 20 years later, Roger Cardinal, a British art critic, started to define it even more with terms like outsider art, visionary art, art of the insane, art of the incarcerated. Site of Passages, this is 1966, vinyl paint. Also, I think it's interesting if you look at a lot of his black lines, they're not really black, they're variegated with gray and red. Dimanche Urbain, 1967, 63 by 51. And, well, it just dawned on me how appropriate having some of these walls painted blue is. Dubuffet must have been a very, not only prolific, but very busy guy. And as I understand it, there was also some controversy about the fact that he had a whole factory, that's what Warhol would have called it, a team of people that were working with him to make a lot of his paintings and sculptures and other things he was doing. And we're going to look at this piece, which is a wonderful piece. Etre et paraître, 1963. This is oil on canvas. 59 by 76. And also note the frame. And it's like I said, one of the ironic things is that Dubuffet always wanted to keep everything as kind of real and rugged and matter of fact and kind of grimy humanism as he could, but you can't really appreciate that until you have a little clean, beautiful, white, austere frame that you can contrast the funkiness against. James Kalm reporting on Jean Dubuffet, The Hourloupe Cycle, here at Pace in Chelsea. You can like this, share, link it up to all your social media sites. You can talk about it, and you can leave your thoughts, ideas, comments, criticisms, and reviews. And you can subscribe. We just ask you to say, as always, thank you, Kate.
Won't you stand by me? Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me.
Oh, thank you.